I'm just reaching out to the clerk here to find out, are we ready to go, or somebody's going to give me a heads up when we're ready?
Good evening. I have just received confirmation that we are live and ready to proceed.
Okay, thank you. I will now call this council meeting to order, February 12th, 2025 at 5 p.m. and virtual tonight instead of in council chambers. And I will turn to Councillor Coburn for the land acknowledgement.
In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabeg, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And we further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. My reflection on our land acknowledgement statement today stems from listening to current news reports of US tariffs and trade. And in that, we see that these are important and challenging times for all Canadians. In addition to the economic impacts of tariffs, let us also keep in mind the potential impact on First Nations inherent in treaty rights. As National Chief Woodhouse states, we must consider the importance of border mobility and the right to maintain spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social relations with Indigenous peoples across borders. Chief Woodhouse is calling on the federal government to ensure First Nations leadership is part of our approach. Discussions about trade and economic policy should recognize and respect the rights, sovereignty, and self-determination of Indigenous peoples, both here and around the world. May we all support actions that ensure First Nations voices are heard, their rights upheld, and freedoms protected.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. A well thought out reflection as always. Adoption of the agenda. Are there any urgent additions to the agenda this evening? Councillor Coburn.
I'm not sure that I would describe it as urgent, but it's certainly a timely request. Many of us on council have received phone calls and emails regarding National Flag Day, which is on Saturday. And in light of what's happening to the south of our border, desire to have some kind of ceremonial flag raising and showing our solidarity as Canadians. And I'm hoping to have that brief discussion added tonight.
Okay, thank you. And I think we will add that under new business. And I think staff have some updates for us that can be shared at that point. Are there any other additions? Seeing none, I will read the recommendation that the agenda be approved as amended. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Day. Any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Does any member wish to declare a pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare at any time throughout the meeting if one should arise. Minutes of the previous meetings will go to the special council meeting. The recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting held on January 13th, 2025 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters and Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And the next item is that the minutes of the council meeting held on January 15th, 2025 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Day, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Under announcements, does anyone wish to make an announcement? Councillor Coburn?
Later this month, there will be the walk, the coldest night of the year, and I am one of the participants in that. Proceeds for this event are going to Safe and Sound, and I'm shamelessly putting a plug in for anyone who wishes to donate. I think I'm at $910 currently, and I would love to hit the $1,000 mark. Let me know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I wonder if from staff we should also announce that the polar plunge is taking place at Shallow Lake Community Center on the 23rd. On the Sunday, registration starting at 9:30 with the plunge taking place at 11 o'clock. And that is raising funds for Special Olympics. I'm seeing nods, so keep that one in mind as well. And I have one about the Citizen Portal launch. I'm pleased to announce an exciting new service that will make it easier than ever for our residents to stay informed and connected. Earlier this week, Georgian Bluffs officially launched MyGB, a brand new online citizen portal designed to simplify access to key municipal services and provide a personalized experience. With MyGB, you can link and manage your property tax accounts, including seeing installment amounts, due dates, and making online payments. Customize your dashboard to stay up to date on upcoming council meetings, engagement opportunities, community events, and other services that matter to you. Receive direct notifications, whether it's service updates, road closures, or community news. This is a step forward in modernizing how we engage with our community, and I would like to thank Deputy CAO and Director of Corporate Services, Brittany Drury, and the team that supported her in getting this accessible, efficient, and user-friendly tool up and running. You can sign up today. All you need to do is visit mygb.georgianbluffs.ca, click Sign Me Up, and enter your email. Complete the secure verification process and start customizing your dashboard. We encourage everyone to take advantage of this new tool and experience the convenience it offers. And if there's no other announcements, we have no public hearings this evening. Public participation for delegations for agenda items. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda must register with the clerk's office. To register, you can complete the online delegation form at www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729 extension 603, or register in council chambers with the clerk prior to the meeting start time of 5 p.m. And this evening we do have two delegations, Greg Palmer and Sandy Palmer. And you will each have 5 minutes to provide comment to council. So I will start with Greg. Go ahead. And welcome. You are muted, Greg.
There you go. I just had to unmute the mic there. I'd first like to thank the Honorable Mayor and Council for allowing me 5 minutes to speak tonight. The 5 minutes isn't a long time. I could probably talk for 2 hours on this subject, as a lot of you probably know, because I've talked to you and sent you letters and emails over the years. But I'll get on with it. I'm here to talk about the Shore Road Allowance. I know that there is a Shore Road Allowance study being done over the last year, and it's continuing. It may take another year or more. But we're asking for help now because we're having some problems on the Shore Road Allowance. Where I live is on Balmy Beach Road, in between Cottage Lane and Old Beach Road. I'm aware that there are two types of waterfront properties in Georgian Bluffs and most places. There are waterfront properties with a road in between, and there are waterfront properties with no road in between. That is what we live on. We have no road in between. Despite this, we have some people who actually believe that there's a road in between ours and are actively telling people there is a road and sending people along there as it's a trail or a road. Some people really believe there's a trail there. I've looked at all the maps in Georgian Bluffs, past and present. There's never been a road on my waterfront. I've looked at all the trail maps, Skidoo trails, snowmobile trails, all the hiking trails, Cobble Beach hiking trail. My backyard is not on your hiking trail maps. There's no hiking trail there. Why we're asking for help now and what we're asking for is signs to be put up at this problem area between Old Beach Road and Cottage Lane, stating there is no trail. This is not a hiking trail. I don't find this that hard to do. There's a park called Centennial Park in Georgian Bluffs, up Gray Road 1 south of Big Bay. In this park, at both ends, at the south end and the north end, there are signs that say, park ends here. Sure, people could walk around those signs and continue and walk along a shore road allowance because it runs from Owen Sound to Wyerton along Georgian Bay. But they don't, because they see these signs and it reminds them that there is the end right here. There's also a park on Presque Isle Road, that there's a parking lot and a beach. There's a fence that goes right down to the water beside that says private property beyond there, which is clearly waterfront with waterfront with a road in between across from them. Okay, so these are some of the things. Why I'm asking for you to put up a sign is because we've had lots of incidents over the years. We've had drunk people walking through our waterfronts, and we've had people walking at night. We've had snowmobiles go through there, like they're not allowed through there. Like you have to be on a trail for a snowmobile with a snowmobile trail pass. We have dirt bikes go through there. But all these things that we've had over the last 10 years, I've been dealing with your council and your staff. Every time I've dealt with someone, they help me for a while, and then they leave, and then someone else comes, and then new CEOs come, on and on for years. It's been 10 years now. But why we're asking for help now, more than we ever have before, is because we have 6 Airbnbs in between Cottage Lane and Old Beach Road that have sprung up in the last year to 2. They are actively telling their clients that there is a shore road hiking trail through our backyards. I guess they make more money that way. I don't know. But these people aren't just walking through like some of the old days where you had some neighbors walking through. Those people have all gone now. Now we have these strangers who are walking along. They're taking pictures. They're looking in people's windows. They're taking pictures of our personal property. They're taking things. I know I only had 5 minutes and I think I'm pretty near the end of it. I could say a lot more, but I don't. I will say one thing before I let you go. To me, this only makes sense for not only to protect the ratepayers along the waterfront that run all the way, like I said, from Wyerton to Owen Sound and also all the inland lakes. It also protects yourselves. There are a lot of hazards on the waterfront. There are pools with no fences on the shore road allowance. There are homes that are either fully or partially on the shore road allowance in between Wyerton and Owen Sound. These things are dangerous for people as well as us. So I ask for signs just to make people aware. Will it stop everybody? No, but it will help. It'll be a deterrent. They'll know when we say to someone, there's no trail or road there, they'll see that. They'll know that. Now you say, why are you walking through here? There's, they say, there's a road, there's a trail. These are what people think. They're being told this. Thank you for listening to me. I won't unmute. Should I just pass it over to Sandy at this point?
Yeah, go ahead. And thank you, Greg. So pass it over to Sandy. And
thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you.
I'm in the dark. Okay. Hello. My name is
Well-
Sandy Palmer. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Sandy.
Okay. I'm extremely uncomfortable speaking in public here, but I'm doing it because of the problems on the Balmy Beach Shore Road allowance. You and your staff have told us repeatedly there is no road or trail on our shore road allowance. Yet here we are telling you about the increasing number of people walking on it. Signs need to be posted so the community can see in reality what you and I already know. It's ridiculous that people have, quote, invented a trail system, some sort of trail system on our shore road allowance by word of mouth. I saw in a previous council meeting, an owner of an Airbnb right near my house refer to the shore road allowance as the waterfront hiking trail. It is no such thing. It's crazy. You have all read letters from us and others, and some of you have received phone calls, so you already know about the strange incidents that are upsetting us. But here's a new one. On Christmas Day, while we were inside our home celebrating with family, our dog went crazy barking. 14 people were on our waterfront with sleds playing in the snow, not a care in the world, because obviously they do believe my waterfront is some kind of trail. It's not a trail, and this is... Signs are desperately needed to educate the Airbnb owners as well as the misconceptions of some of the neighborhood. It should not be my job to educate the public. And so far, I have been verbally assaulted trying to tell a gentleman he has to keep his dog, a pit bull, on a leash. It is on our waterfront. It is your responsibility to post signage where you know there are hazards, and you have letters to that effect in your possession. Not posting signs puts you at risk of lawsuits if someone gets hurt on this imaginary trail you know about, but do nothing to maintain. The truth is you do not maintain it because it's not a trail. You need to let the public know this. Please put up signs at the gates on Old Beach Drive and at the gates on Cottage Lane to protect us all. The sign should say, "This is not a trail." The public will then be aware of what I and you already know. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you to both of you. And I know this item is coming up later in the agenda, so we will move on with the next parts of our agenda at this point. And moving on, the next item is consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anyone wishes to pull for discussion? Seeing none, the one that I would like to pull is 9.3.9, which has to do with sovereignty of Canada. And I think this somewhat fits with our Flag Day discussion as well. So if we could pull that one. And so I need a motion. The recommendation is that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less item 9.3.9, and that all items contained therein are hereby approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Scholdice and Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so item 9.3.9 then, which deals with, sorry, I'm grab the other mouse, pull that one up. I think this somewhat fits with what everybody is feeling right now about the situation south of the border that Councillor Coburn referenced earlier. And I'm just wondering if we can provide support for this as well. And I will open it up to other members of the council to see if anyone else has any comments. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to look to the clerk for, do we need a mover and seconder to move this one forward?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. At this time, it would be a benefit to have a motion to direct staff to prepare a letter of support for the resolution passed by Halton Hills, if council so desired.
Okay, so I will go to council. Would anyone be willing to move and second this item? Deputy Mayor Pringle? Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson. Okay, so that's direction to staff to prepare and bring back a resolution for council to look at.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, the recommendation would be that staff issue a letter of support for the Halton Hills resolution as it stands. But if there's desire for it to be brought back in a different form, then we're more than happy to do that as well.
You know, I personally would be willing to support the resolution that they have in place. So if the mover and seconder are okay with that, then I will, if there's no further discussion, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried, and thank you. Moving on then, we have committee reports. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on February 5th, 2025 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2025-001 to COW 2025-008, and that all actions contained therein be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder there, please? Councillor Day. Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion on any of those? I guess there is. We have to pull it. I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. We are through to information reports. Recommendation is that the information reports contained herein be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters? Councillor Coburn? Is there any discussion? I think there's only one information report, and that's the territorial acknowledgement policy. So, Councillor Coburn?
Yes, sorry, I was just reading the new statement, which I fully support. And thanks to staff for doing more digging and more consultation on this. My only comment, and I hate to be the punctuation person, but in the last paragraph, I think we have a comma where it doesn't need to be. So we reflect on our role as treaty people and the need to live in respect. I don't think there's a comma that's necessary there. It just seems a little misplaced. Minor, but thank you.
Thank you. I did actually notice that one as well. So thank you for bringing that one forward. I don't like to see us put anything on our website that's not totally accurate. So thank you. If there's no other comments on that, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. There are no recommendation reports. We're down to bylaws. Under other bylaws, the recommendation is that bylaw 2025-009, being a bylaw for the imposition and collection of fees and charges for certain municipal services and activities, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next item is that bylaw 2025-010, being a bylaw to adopt a territorial acknowledgement policy, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next item is that bylaw 2025-011, being a bylaw to remove certain lands from part lot control in the township of Georgian Bluffs, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Day. Is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. We have no unfinished business under new business. Shore Road Allowance Background Study Update. This is further to notice of discussion provided by Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn at the January 15th meeting. And I'll turn it over to Councillor Coburn here.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Sorry, I wasn't expecting that. We were just, several residents have been asking for an update as to the status of this study, and the same for the short-term rental program. So that's all we were looking for, were just updates.
Okay, so I have them on here as two separate, so I'll be coming back to you a second time. So I will turn to staff now.
Good evening, through you, Mayor Carlton. Thank you for the question, and I'm happy to provide an update and take any questions that there may be stemming from that. So we've continued. We engaged a legal company, as you know, in late April, early May of 2024 to start work in helping us to understand the nature of the Shore Road Allowance, the extent of the Shore Road Allowance, understand the scope of activities that have occurred in terms of ownership of the Shore Road Allowance, and that work is ongoing. I had anticipated and hoped to bring back a update report before this point. However, that work has been somewhat convoluted, as we had perhaps expected, and that update is later than I would have liked. However, we are anticipating bringing back an update now in March. That will not be the conclusion of the work. It will be an update on progress made so far, both from a generic perspective and from a property specific perspective. I have regular update meetings with the team that's looking into this, and they have dug into a number of property specific issues as we've gone through the last year. So we know a lot more than we did, but we're not yet completed the study.
Thank you for that. And going back to our two delegates earlier in the meeting, is there a chance that, and I recognize that trying to put up signage at this time of year would be virtually impossible, is there a chance we can look at that in the spring, of getting some signage down there that reflects that it is not a trail or something to that effect?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, in answer to the question, staff have had some conversations with Mr. Palmer in the past, and other residents in this particular section of the Shoreline Road Allowance, and some signage was added last year and remains in place today, which states that it's not a through road. That was new signage that was added in the beginning of, or the early part of 2024, to try and deal with some of the challenges that Mr. Palmer and other residents have experienced down there. The slight challenge we have is this is one of the sections of the Shore Road Allowance we do actually have a fairly good understanding of the status of it, and the Shore Road Allowance, as it runs between Mr. Palmer's property and the water, is intact and is owned by the municipality. So it has both the Shore Road Allowance bylaw over it, and it is owned by the municipality in that particular section. So the status is actually quite clear in the instance of this location, and the compounding factor why we've not added a sign to the effect of not a trail is due to the fact that the Shore Road Allowance does run over that. Prior to the formation of the municipalities under Crown legislation, people have a right to cross over Shore Road Allowance lands, and they can do so by a number of means. So despite the fact it isn't a road, and despite the fact it isn't a trail, as Mr. Palmer and Mrs. Palmer have accurately articulated, there is an inherent public right to cross over those lands, and that is enshrined in legislation. It's not something which is a simple bylaw. So the challenge we have is, if we're seen to be taking something which would indicate that inherent right doesn't exist, we may find ourselves in a more challenging situation. Mr. Palmer did note the signage quite accurately, which is at the edge of some of our parks, which says this is the boundary of the park. And that signage, I can only assume, was selected, the wording was selected with the similar mindset, is that yes, that is the edge of the park, but it does not necessarily mean it is the edge of the public's right to access those lands at those points. So it's a little more complicated. I'd be happy to bring back a more detailed report on that question if council so directed. But at a high level, based on the work that we've done so far, that's our understanding.
Thank you. And I will go to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be honest, I've been at this for a few terms, and I was curious about this. So I had a belief that all shore road allowance was not public domain, but that people could have access to it. And so then I thought, am I wrong about this, or have I just convinced myself that that's the truth? So I did some research, and the information I found surprised me, but it was not that. So I'm not challenging what you're saying. I'm just curious because I just did this week. So I'm curious because it says the concept of public right of passage along Great Lakes shoreline has been proposed, but it was not made into law. So I'm assuming that there's something I'm missing here. There's some legislation that I'm missing, because the information I found was that, it said quite clearly there is no public right of passage on there. So I thought, am I missing something? Am I getting contradictory or incorrect information? I just was looking for some clarification on that.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Thompson, I can try. This is one of those pieces which we are looking into and the lawyers are looking into. So I'm going by the information that the lawyers have provided to me. You are quite correct in that there is no public inherent right to waterfront lands. The inherent right stems from the fact that there is a road allowance over those lands. So it's not the presence of the lands, it's the presence of the road allowance over those lands which creates that right. So it's not the waterfront, it's the same right that gives people the right to walk or traverse by snowmobile, by ATV, or indeed by any means that doesn't cause damage over any unopened road allowance. And so it's that right which is the one that drives this particular instance.
So it's a shoreline, it's a road allowance right, not a shoreline right. And the road allowance right, is that determined by municipality or by a province? And then I'll leave you alone. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Carlton, you're quite correct. Yes, it's the road allowance right. The right that is inherent within the road allowance is beyond the municipality's control in terms of establishing that right. However, the municipality does have the ability to restrict that right. So when we stop and close up a road allowance by bylaw, we are in essence stopping that inherent right from existing. And so Mr. Palmer is quite accurate. Our belief going into this work was that the road allowance was more or less intact. We now know that indeed it's not intact. The municipality has undertaken in a number of instances to stop and close up the shoreline road allowance. Now, we haven't in all those instances also transferred the property, and in some instances we've transferred the property, but we haven't stopped the inherent right. So that inherent right exists on both bits of the shoreline road allowance we own and on sections of the shoreline road allowance that we may not own. In this particular instance, it has that compounding factor that these are also publicly owned lands. So Mr. Palmer lives in one of those situations where he has the two elements. He has the publicly owned lands piece. He also has that road allowance piece that's there. So you are quite correct, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And I will go to, I think, Councillor Day, I saw your hand up next. You're muted. You are muted.
There we go. Thank you for your patience. Through you, Mayor Carlton, to CAO Lobley, can you speak a little bit about the rights involved with, I understand the concept of the shore road allowance being over the land, giving the inherent right to traverse the shore road allowance. How does that work in relation to an Airbnb owner advertising a shoreline trail and the legalities of that advertising, especially if it's in print on their brochures or websites, something that might be a road allowance, but it isn't necessarily a trail that is defined by the municipality or maintained by the municipality?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Day, again, excellent question. And Mr. Palmer did a very good job in his delegation of expressing some of the conversations that we've had over the years. A shoreline road allowance, while it has that inherent right, is not a trail. And so that inherent right is limited and restricted to you do it clearly under your own risk. There is nothing there to facilitate that action. Now, as owners of the land, we have owner-occupier liability responsibilities that exist, and municipalities, as we all know, end up being on the hook at the bottom of everything. We would have concerns if there were businesses that were promoting this as a trail, and one of the benefits of us going through the and I don't want to provide an update on the next item on the agenda, but one of the benefits of the bylaws that have been passed in terms of the short-term accommodations is we will have contact details for properties operating as such, and we will be able to reach out to the property owners that Mr. Palmer has indicated that may be promoting this, and firmly encourage them that they shouldn't be promoting this as a trail. It is not managed as a trail. It is not posted as a trail, the inherent right to cross is not an inherent right to stop and have a picnic or a barbecue or to enjoy it like a park. It's an inherent right to cross over, not an inherent right to use it as a public park. And so we would be quite happy to take away an action to connect with the short-term accommodation owners to clarify in their minds any operator that's operating a short-term accommodation on the shoreline road allowance should make it abundantly clear that if they are promoting access over or to elements of the shoreline in front of neighbouring properties, they should be speaking to those property owners first to make sure that they're okay with that being done. There is no inherent right for a short-term accommodation owner to promote access to parts of the shoreline for recreation.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Carlton, to our CAO. My understanding of shore roads historically was to be able to allow property owners along their access to their backyards, really, to do work, to get in perhaps larger pieces of equipment to do work. And it's morphed into something, in my opinion, that's very different now. People have come to interpret that as a place to stroll and a place to hike, and that it's largely a wide open usage concept. So I'm curious to know, what are other municipalities doing about this problem? If it's our property and we have a right to, my understanding is we have a right to limit usage. Is that an avenue that we can take? And if not, so that's part A. Part B is, what is wrong with signage that says this is not a trail, this is not maintained? Does that produce any additional liability or risk? I'm just wondering what the case is against additional signage.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Coburn, you are keeping me on my toes this evening. These are very, very, very good questions. To the first one, a slight correction. Shoreline road allowances were created through Crown Survey And the primary reason for the creation of the shoreline road allowances was not for the access of adjacent owners. It was for access to and from the water at the time, for the use of boats coming in to take lumber, for example, and for the inherent right of a boat that was struggling, a ship that was struggling to land without causing trespass, and for a rescue to occur in those instances. So the reason these were created were to provide for economic prosperity and to support industry and growth along the shoreline. I think you're quite correct, though, that over time, that need has certainly lessened and has been replaced by them being used in some instances as trails, in some instances where we have control and ownership of it as parks, and in other instances by neighbours to, as you say, access the shoreline with seasonal equipment, docks, boats, so on and so forth. So I think you are quite correct that the nature of use of these has changed, which is one of the reasons why doing the work that we're doing is I think informative to instructing how the municipality may wish to manage, dispose of, or change its management of shoreline road allowances. So hopefully that answers the first question. In regards to the second question,
just wondering, along with that, and I appreciate your explanation, are you aware of any innovative ways that other municipalities have dealt with this particular issue? And that may be a conversation down the road. I always think it's helpful to turn to other municipalities who have been at the shoreline road allowance problem for decades, probably before we have. So if that's to come, that's to come, and I accept that.
So through you, Mayor Carleton, I can add a little bit. I think there is much more to come on that as we move forward. But yes, we have done a little bit of digging around, and the lawyers have done likewise. So there are different ways in different municipalities. I think the majority of municipalities that are like us, that have never really done anything too much with a shoreline and have benefited from relatively low residential use, have really not spent a great deal of time thinking too hard about shoreline areas. And so they find themselves in a similar situation to us. Some areas, particularly if you go into the Muskokas, some of the Muskokas have seen very aggressive private purchase of shoreline road allowances and municipalities undertaking to sell and close up shoreline road allowances. They have experienced some pushback around that, particularly from Indigenous communities who have lost access to water, lost access to traditional rice crops and various other things, which have been highlighted as challenges there. If we look to our south and the GTA, which has obviously seen the most intense residential pressure, municipalities like the city of Burlington, the town of Oakville, are actually now in the process of trying to buy back and through zoning amendments and planning applications re-secure the shoreline road allowance to secure corridors for public access or for biodiversity or for parkland management. So there are a variety of different options that municipalities have explored. I don't think there's any one size that fits all, but certainly one of the pieces I hope to bring back as we further the conversation about our ultimate desire or your ultimate desire for the shoreline will be to look at the various different ways in which municipalities have managed this challenge. But I should stress, many haven't. There are a number of ongoing land claims, just like ours, which have involved the shoreline road allowance. And so many have found themselves in a period of not wanting to address it for the difficulty that it is, but also not wanting to address it because of ongoing liability issues and legal action around the shoreline. So I hope I answered a little bit further, but certainly more to come on that topic. In respect to the trail, so we could put up a sign that says this is not a trail in front of this property. Indeed, we can put that in on any road allowance in the township. We don't manage it as a trail. It's not promoted as a trail, and that sign would be factual. Having said that, that sign has absolutely no legal standing. There is nothing that we could do to prevent somebody from actually using this as a trail. So if we think, and the difficulty is I'm splitting hairs here, and I appreciate I'm splitting hairs, but the rail trail, as an example of a trail that we own and manage, people have the right to go over the rail trail in a variety of different ways, and we manage it as a trail. They have both the right, and we manage the trail underneath it. There's a clear bed for the trail. There's a clear intended use for that trail. It's clearly a trail, both in terms of its use and the way in which it looks. But if we take back trail usage to what it looks like at its basic level, trail usage looks like somebody walking or cycling or using an ATV or using a snowmobile, whatever might be permitted, from passing from point A to point B along a linear route. The challenge we have on the shoreline is it's not managed as a trail, it has no surface, no signage or anything else like that. But that right to use it to go from point A to point B is one and the same. And so putting a sign up that says this is not a trail could be interpreted by some as seeking to limit their ability to take their inherent right to use a right of way, a road allowance to cross from point A to point B. That's exactly why when we've had these conversations with Mr. Palmer and other residents down there, we did install the signs that say no through road, to make it quite clear that there was a very specific separation between the managed road surface of Old Cottage Lane at one end and at the other end, Old Beach Drive, to make it abundantly clear that you're passing into something different. And indeed, somebody has put up gates in the past at both ends, and I appreciate Mr. Palmer has had challenges with those gates being opened and left opened and in the past, and I believe coming up to current day. So it is quite clear that this is not an area where public access is being encouraged or invited. It's quite clear that there is no through road, and it's quite clear when you look at the landscape, there is no managed trail. It's mown grass in most instances, maintained by the residents along there, and indeed some of them have infrastructure, as Mr. Palmer has indicated on there. So it's quite clear it is not a trail in the same sense that the rail trail is a trail. Having said all of that, putting up a sign that seeks to limit somebody's ability to pass from point A to point B could actually be limiting their ability to use their inherent right. In respect to the liability, if we put up a sign, but we have absolutely no ability to be able to take any enforcement under that sign, we could be leading to a more confusing situation. Is if we put a sign up saying this is not a trail and somebody continues to do, people continue to use it in the way in which they're using it right now, and we have no ability to change that, we could be exposing ourselves to more liability. Having said that, the liability is already there, and the liabilities are relatively small, but the liabilities are already there.
Can I just ask here, is the problem, if people were simply walking through and using that inherent right to go from A to B, is perhaps not so much the problem as they see this as being an area of parkland? Can we reference it as this is not parkland?
That would certainly be, through you, Mayor Carlton, that would certainly be something. And we can certainly look at signage to that effect, saying this is not a public park, this is not, we could do something along those sorts of lines for sure. And as I indicate, you know, we've had some conversation, and Mr. Palmer's indicated we've had conversation now for a number of years. I think, Mr. Palmer, you may have been one of my first residents that I had a lengthy phone call on this very topic shortly after I started. And so Mr. Palmer has, and I appreciate that residents down there have experienced challenges beyond people just walking. So I think it's both the walking and it's some of the behaviours that have been exhibited. Now, we have taken action about some of those behaviours, and we do have the ability to enforce some of those behaviours. And as I said this evening, we'd be more than happy to reach out to anyone that is operating a short-term accommodation operation down there to make it quite clear this is not a trail. You should not be encouraging its use as a trail. We can certainly look at putting up some signage along the effect of this is not a public park.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine is more a question about processing. I'm just wondering what we're doing here. It feels like we're debating the shoreline study and we don't have it a little bit. And the explanations are really detailed, and I think we have to consider here, this is a road allowance. This is a road allowance question, and I think we really need to lean into this. But I'm not sure if we're ready to do that right now, or I'm just speaking for myself. But I also think we're having really rich discussion and explanation, but we really haven't put it on the agenda as if that was what we were going to do tonight. So I'm just wondering about the process. I never want to inhibit a good conversation, but I'm wondering if we've got the order right. I say that because I was prepared to respond to some of these things, and then I think, is it appropriate? Because I don't know about this practice of putting up signs that we hope will do one thing, or we hope will mean something to somebody, or stop somebody from doing something that we really don't have a policy to back it up. Like, it just, to me, it feels problematic, some of this discussion that we're having in terms of that. But I'd like us to do it when we're ready to do it. But if people feel differently, I'm okay with that too.
Okay, thank you. CEO Lobley.
Yeah, briefly through you, Mayor Carleton. One of the reasons I think Mr. Palmer is here, and I don't wish to put words into his mouth, is exactly the point you've just raised, Councillor Thompson. We have not been able to satisfy Mr. Palmer or indeed other residents because our information has been, we've done as much as we feel comfortable to do before we have the much broader conversation about the bigger issues associated to this.
Okay, before I go to Deputy Mayor Pringle, I'd just like to respond to Councillor Thompson. It's on as notice of discussion. I think that's what we're having is discussion. It's definitely going to have to come back, but I think if we can somewhat help residents with solving what's a major problem for them. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Pringle next.
Thanks, Mayor Carleton. I'll get Mr. Palmer to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't believe your ask is to stop people from going through. You just want them to go through and not loiter, and, you know, like you want them to go, they come in, they go a straight line, they walk straight through, and they're out the other side, not hanging around the shoreline, not hanging around the back of your property. We need some sort of signage that says, you know, no stopping, no loitering, or whatever may be on that. They can go through and use it, because we obviously, that's clear that they can use it. But I wanted, just for clarity from Mr. Palmer there, like, you're not trying to stop people from going through, right?
So we're now getting into a point where we shouldn't be getting into dialogue with someone who delegated, and I see the clerk nodding her head. So
All right.
Well, I'm here if you want me to answer the question.
Yeah, I think our procedural bylaw would prohibit us from interacting. So perhaps that is a discussion you can have in future with staff. And Councillor Thompson, I see you, Deputy Mayor Pringle first. Are you finished with yours before I go back to Councillor?
That was really all I was wanting. Like, it was just for, like, the clarity, I guess, looking at, like, you're not trying to stop people from using it. We know that they can. It's just how far we can go with that piece of it, I guess. To me, a couple signs doesn't seem like that big an issue, but to get the right words on the sign will be the issue. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Thompson, you did still have your hand up. Did you have another comment? Okay.
I just didn't put it down. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Just checking. So if there's no other comments here, then we're not giving direction on this at all. So we'll move on to the next item, which is 14.2 short-term rental accommodation licensing program update. And again, Councillor Coburn, you had brought this forward, so I will let you comment on it first.
I really don't have much of a comment other than folks have been asking what the status of the program is. Since that little flurry of requests came through, I believe we've had a lot of action moving that program forward. Thank you to Brittany, I think especially, and looking forward to an update so that folks know what the status of that is. Thank you.
I see our deputy CAO on. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, and through you. You are correct, Councillor Coburn, and thank you for presenting this within this forum so we can publicly highlight the progress that we've made thus far. So Council will recall the last time that you saw the bylaw was the council meeting in October, in which you ratified the bylaw and therefore ratified the licensing program. At that point, we then went full speed ahead at developing the portal to receive applications. It is all completely online. We do have the ability to accept applications in person and accept payment in person should people not wish to pay via credit card. So we began developing the portal. We released it for a beta test in late 2024 and released it to a small number of voluntarily registered short-term accommodation operators throughout the township. We had them run through the licensing process and provide any feedback. We then took the initial phases of 2025 to work through any of the feedback that they had given us, any of the kinks that were identified in the program, and then we went fully live with the program at the end of January. We have now received 6 applications since going live, and correspondence to all local short-term accommodation operators has been sent via hard copy, notifying them of the March 1st submission deadline so we can get everyone licensed and ready to go for this upcoming season. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from anyone on council? Councillor Coburn?
Right. So a March 1st deadline is a couple of weeks away. We've got 6 registered out of how many STAs were received the mail out? How many known? Was it 170? Am I recalling correctly?
118 at this point.
Yeah. 118. And is there any kind of consequence for not meeting that deadline for known operators, or how does that work?
So in short, if operators have not met the March 1st deadline, they then are operating in violation of the existing licensing requirements. Throughout the course of 2025, we'll be working with our enforcement team and that of the City of Owen Sound that we are partnering through the shared visit building services agreement. We're partnering with them on this file as well. We will be working with that team to proactively seek out compliance prior to enforcement. So we will be treating 2025 as a year to encourage compliance prior to pursuing active enforcement measures. That's not to say that we won't be using them. We will be using them, but we're leading with education throughout 2025, ensuring that we've hit all of our local operators. They understand that the licensing process exists and they understand what's expected of them under the new licensing program.
Councillor Coburn, go ahead, and then I'll go to Councillor Shouldice.
So in essence, we're telling folks you can avoid this for a whole year and we're going to get real in 2026. Maybe I'm misinterpreting, but I guess I find that a little disappointing on behalf of the folks whose lives have been impacted by these operations. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Shouldice?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Carlton. This goes back to Brittany. How did you guys reach out to them? Like, when I'm just running the numbers here, that's 4.5% or 5%. That doesn't seem. I don't understand that. I just wanted to reach out and ask you guys how did you go about contacting them? Could we recontact them, or reach out to them again. 4.5% or 5%, that just seems a lot more low than I had anticipated it may have been.
As in, how did we contact all local operators?
Correct.
We contacted them via hard copy. So through our partnership with Granicus, Granicus provides us with an address identification feature that allows us to pull active listings and the addresses associated with those listings. We pulled all of the active listings in Georgian Bluffs and sent hard copy correspondence to the owners of those properties, informing them of the licensing process and further of the March 1st deadline.
Go ahead, Councillor Shoulders.
Oh, sure, thanks. Okay, yeah, thanks for letting me know. I'm trying to rationalize things. I mean, I'm thinking, would the mail strike have influenced that at all? Is there a reason they would have gotten that late? Is there a reason why we're only seeing 5%? I'm hopeful that it's not just something like they're not getting their mail on time, or I just thought I'd ask how they're getting this information. Okay, thanks.
So I think I would suggest they've got 2 more weeks. I think when we get into March is the time that we need to really start going back after them. But if we've given a March 1st deadline, I don't think we can start pushing ahead of that date. But we definitely can after that date. Sorry, Brittany, I interrupted.
No, that's okay. And it's not to say that the mail out will be the only mechanism of contacting the local operators. We will be continuing to pursue compliance throughout the remainder of this year and throughout the remainder of the program. That will include more active mail outs, that will include site visits for those that we know are operating, site visits for those that we know are operating without a license that may encounter some compliance issues, being enforcement issues. We're just at this point really trying to advertise the best that we can that we have the licensing program and seeking compliance first prior to enforcement measures. And that's not to say we will not pursue enforcement. We certainly will for those properties that we do receive complaints about. But for now, we are simply just trying to ensure that the community knows about the program and getting it up and running the best that we can.
Thank you for that. Is there, Councillor Scholz, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. One last question. And thanks, Brittany, for your response. I really appreciate it. My last question I'll ask, really simply put, for the folks that are living beside an STA or that are neighboring to an STA that have a feeling that this STA may or may not be on the registry, how would they best go about acknowledging that with the municipality?
So we have a few mechanisms available. We have our Contact GB form that's available on our website, and that those complaints or issues do come directly to the enforcement team and myself. Second, we have our 24/7 hotline that takes in issues and seeks a rapid response type of response from our enforcement team. And third, I'm always happy to discuss which operators have licenses, which don't. That is public information and information that I hope to be available on our website as well.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you. And Councillor Coburn, before I come to you, I noticed our clerk has her hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Through you, I was just going to add on to Brittany's comment. Cloud Permit, the licensing software that we are using to facilitate the applications, does have a portion of the software that is an online map. And so members of the public, once we get that up and going, will actually be able to visit the short-term rental accommodation site and be able to see, they'll be able to filter out building permits, zoning information, and also licensing information. So that's something we're working on to make that information more available to anybody who may be concerned about that.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Coburn.
So I'm going to return to the March 1st deadline because that was news to me and it's just taken me a little while to process that. I don't recall council having input into such a long staged a long phase-in stage for compliance with registration. I'm really hesitant, and I've stated this before with other matters not related to STAs, but I'm really hesitant to put compliance action into the hands of neighboring property owners. I think that will only create more conflict with neighbors. I don't think it's fair. It might put some folks in a difficult position. If we have the means with our shared service agreement to go ahead and enforce that, I, for one, am not in favor of having an educational approach for an entire year. We can certainly, I believe, have an educational approach till April or even May. But come busy season, if we don't have folks registering because now they know they don't really need to unless there's a complaint sent in, which a lot of folks will be hesitant to do, then we're looking at kicking this proverbial can down the road again. So I'm contemplating presenting a motion at this time to extend that deadline until May 1st, after which we ought to employ bylaw compliance measures to have registration in place for this summer season. And I would put that motion on the floor.
If I can, through you, Mayor Carlton, I mean,
Go ahead.
I'm happy to have council have this discussion if you so wish to. It is most certainly not my expectation or my want to kick the metaphorical can down the road. A lot of work went into this program. A lot of work had to go into the portal to make it usable and accessible and easy to use for operators. We have partnered with JSS in the past. We will continue to partner with JSS for bylaw enforcement services. While we will be educating the community, that does not stop us from enforcing. The bylaw is in effect following March 1st. Those operating are operating in violation of the bylaw. I don't wish to simply not acknowledge that. I just wish to give people the opportunity to comply prior to bringing them into involuntary compliance. Now, where we require enforcement measures to be taken, we will not avoid that. We will take the enforcement measures. We have the ability to take those measures and will do so. I'm simply just suggesting that where the opportunity for education presents itself, we will take it. Where that educational opportunity is not available and enforcement is required, we will take the enforcement avenue.
CAO Lovely.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, thank you very much. And just before, I think there is a motion on the floor. I don't think it's been seconded yet. I think before there are some legal nuances which it would be worth revisiting. That before a direction of zero compliance would be given at a certain date, I think it would be beneficial to have a closed session conversation around that.
Okay, and I do recognize we have a motion on the floor. I'm wondering if I'll get a seconder because then we can have discussion. So is anybody willing to second that motion? Carly, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, it is a preference if it's done under notice of motion, just so that we can work to actually get the full context of the motion and have it fully considered before it's presented for decision and discussion.
Thank you. And I guess I'm just questioning, Councillor Coburn, with you, what you were proposing for a motion. Are we pushing that date forward when right now we've got a March 1st that we can start enforcement after that? And so please go ahead.
Well, I can say that I honestly have never been more confused, because when I posed the question initially, what I thought I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that for this year, we are taking an education approach to registration only. And the only way that we would be finding people non-compliant is if a complaint was registered by someone else in the community. That is what I was objecting to. And if I misunderstood that, then apologies on my part. But that is what I believe I heard. So I guess I'm still confused as to the intent. I'm also confused as to the legal considerations and closed session. So I feel like I'm not in the loop regarding that, and that's probably fair enough. But if we need to have a closed session discussion down the road in order to make this happen, then I suppose I don't know what I don't know. And so I could withdraw it in the event that a closed session discussion would help us to be better informed. I'm curious to hear what other folks have to say.
Okay, Councillor Thompson and Shouldice, do you mind if I go to our Deputy CAO first before I come to you? Brittany, go ahead.
Thank you. And I apologize if I'm being unclear. I do think it's a little bit of both. And with the first year of any licensing program, I would expect to see a little bit of both. I obviously, on behalf of the township, it would be the perfect scenario if everyone would voluntarily comply immediately. With any licensing program, that's simply not the case. It will take time and it will take communication and efforts on the staff team to have people made aware of the program and have them then hopefully find voluntary compliance. That is the education piece. We are relying heavily on the education piece to inform people of the program and hopefully identify as much voluntary compliance as is possible. Where voluntary compliance can't be found, we will seek enforcement efforts. So I hope I've clarified. In managing this program and in managing the team that's overseeing the program, I don't believe that we need to extend the March 1st deadline because we do have mechanisms available to us as of March 1st to enact enforcement measures where we need them. If we push that deadline out, that would push enforcement measures out that much further. So I would encourage council, if we could, to continue observance of the March 1st deadline. And we will continue to do all that we can internally to encourage voluntary compliance where possible. And where it's not, we will then fall upon the enforcement measures that we've built into our program.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Thompson?
Well, I'm not sure now. I was going to recommend that we have a good idea might be a notice of motion, and then we put that forward to another meeting and we have a discussion about it. But then when CIO brought up the need for a potential closed session, then I got confused. So I'm not sure what I think now. I think it feels to me like we need another conversation, and I would have said an open session conversation, but I might not know what I don't know, I think, and is what Councillor Coburn is saying. I kind of agree with. So that's what I think right now. I think we need another conversation.
Thank you. And Councillor Shouldice, you had your hand up?
I just wanted to say, when I was listening to Councillor Coburn speak, I tend to agree with a lot of what she had to say, and I will go as far as saying if her motion still stands, I would happily second this.
Councillor Coburn, is your motion still standing, or did I hear you say you were withdrawing?
I said I would be happy to withdraw if I misunderstood.
Okay.
I'm not 100% clear on, given what our CAO has said about a potential legal consideration, and a closed session, I am happy to withdraw my motion if the seconder would so agree, but only with the understanding that that closed session be scheduled fairly soon.
Okay, so what I was hearing though from the clerk is that this should come up under the next, under notice of motion or notice of discussion. So we should bring it forward at that time.
So if I may, Mayor Carlton, I know the clerk who uses her words very carefully, and I'm always impressed by that, said that it's preferable, but procedurally, a motion on the floor is absolutely acceptable if the discussion is part of the agenda, which this is. So procedurally, it would be quite acceptable for me to put a motion on the floor. I know it's not preferable because then our staff have to scramble and assist with wording and so on. I do respect that perspective. So I will withdraw again with the support of the seconder if a closed session to loop us all in on what these legal considerations are is scheduled within a reasonable time frame. In other
Okay.
words, soon. Thank you.
Okay. CAO?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, much as I'd like the motion to be withdrawn, I think what might be useful at this point is so that we're clear on what's coming forward. If I am understanding Councillor Coburn's points correctly, and I believe Councillor Shouldice's support, is Councillor Coburn is seeking to move more rapidly to a zero compliance of non-compliance with the zero acceptance of non-compliance with the requirement to license a short-term accommodation. There has been some legal advice that has been provided to council in the past on this one in regards to this issue, which is extremely relevant, which is why I raised the closed session notion. But if Councillor Coburn was open to a motion on the floor, which was to direct staff to bring back a report at the earliest on the effects and challenges of moving to a zero acceptance of non-compliance position, then that would allow us to bring that report back in some time.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn?
So thank you for that through you, Mayor Carlton, to our CAO and senior staff. I'm once again finding myself confused because the kind of report you're talking about sounds like it ought to be considered in open session, but I reference your comment earlier about a closed session discussion, which sounds like that might be an entirely different thing. So I want to make sure that council, all of council, is fully aware of all of the legal implications, whether they be open session reports or closed session discussions.
So if I might suggest, if there's a motion to bring this back for further report, that we leave it at that with staff to determine whether this report coming to council needs to be open session or closed session, and allow it to come back in the proper form. And it may be a combination of those two, but that we allow staff to bring that back in that manner. So I think we're back to your motion on the floor, Councillor Coburn, seconded by Councillor Shouldice. And I'm going to go to the clerk to be sure she understands what that motion is before I call a vote on it. Councillor Coburn.
Sorry, I did say that I was willing to withdraw it, and the clerk will help us with this procedurally because it did get a seconder. So I think if I'm happy to withdraw it pending report closed/open regarding legal implications, then I'm happy to withdraw, and that will save us all a lot of work right now, I think.
Okay, I think my understanding of why we might need a motion is that's what's going to give that direction to staff. So I'll go to the clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, through you. As Councillor Coburn's original motion was withdrawn with acceptance of the seconder, I believe it would be appropriate at this time to put another motion on the floor with that specific direction to staff to bring back the report. Just to have a look at those questions that have been raised during this meeting and to also give staff some time to think about how that information is best presented.
Thank you. Okay. So back to you, Councillor Coburn. Are you willing to put that motion on the floor that the clerk has just outlined?
I am, with
you.
an emphasis on council being fully informed of all legal implications that could involve both open and closed session discussions.
Thank you. And Councillor Scholdice, you are seconding that?
Yes, I am going to second this. Can I just add a caveat to this, if possible? One thing that I really appreciated when we meet with Chatsworth there, one thing I really like is being able to see that they're very specific and set on times when they make motions. I'm wondering if we can put a date with this instead of, Niall, when you say the earliest, I totally appreciate that, but I think it's important to have dates associated with these things too. So if we could throw a date on there, that way it's more specific, that would be appreciated, and I would second it with the date.
I will turn to staff for that.
I could do my best to have something in front of council in March.
Does that work, Councillor Scholdice?
That is a month, not a date.
I think if we leave it to staff, they're going to have some work to do on this. So if we have a commitment to have that report back in March, I think should be reasonable. And if there's no other discussion on this by others on council, I will call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay. Moving on, the next item is the item that we added at the beginning of council of this agenda, and that is Flag Day. And Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. So some of us have received phone calls and emails with encouragement for the municipality to host a Canadian flag raising ceremony or partner with the City of Owen Sound, for example, on Saturday, which is National Flag Day, the 60th anniversary of our current iteration of the Canadian flag. And in light of what's happening south of the border and facing some economic threats, folks feel that this would be a real show of solidarity for our country. And I know that Niall has been involved in those talks as well as yourself, Mayor Carlton. So I'll just turn it over to you to get your thoughts.
Thank you. And yes, I do fully support this, and conversations about this started early yesterday morning. So I know that CAO Lobley has been speaking to the city. I may turn it to you now for, do we have any confirmation of what is happening there?
So through Mayor Carlton to Mayor Coburn and indeed all of council, yes, there's been some significant encouragement for the township and city to work together and jointly host a celebration of the Canadian flag in celebration of the 60th anniversary of the Canadian flag, the current iteration of the flag, and to encourage community to come together in supporting local, buying local, and working with Grey Bruce businesses. So throughout the course of today, staff at the township and the city have been working on this, and I'm delighted to say that there will be a joint event. The joint event will take place in Owen Sound on 8th Street West. There will be a flag raising ceremony. It will take place on Friday at 4 p.m. And that will allow for media messaging to go out in advance of Saturday, which is actually Flag Day, to encourage that shop local mentality and to encourage people to visit like the market in downtown Owen Sound to do their shopping this weekend, to support local businesses. We did look at organising something on the Saturday. It just wasn't possible to coordinate schedules and calendars to make that happen. And so the Friday will allow for the media releases to all be prepared, photo opportunities to go out in advance of Saturday. So any member of council is more than welcome to attend and encouraged to attend as much as we possibly can. If there's a good photo opportunity, then we will look to make the best of it. So there will be a flag raising ceremony in Owen Sound on 8th Street, just outside City Hall, a shared effort between the two municipalities that will take place on Friday at 4 p.m.
Thank you. And I will plan on being there, and hopefully some of the rest can be there as well. Before I go to Councillor Scholdice, I do understand that there is a community effort to have something on Saturday, the actual Flag Day. So I wonder if in our media release, we can be sure to let the public know about that as well.
So
Go
to you,
ahead.
Mayor Carlton, breaking news on that one. It looks likely that the desire is to try and align efforts as best as possible. So I don't have full details on that at this point, but we in an email received just shortly before 5, there is a strong desire to have this as a unified political community approach. And so I think a singular event at this point is Friday at 4 p.m.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Scholdice.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to be in attendance. If you guys could see my monthly schedule, you would say that I'm insane. That being said, I am free on the 14th. I have a full day off, believe it or not. I just wanted to confirm, Niall, that it is the 14th we're referring to.
Friday the 14th, we get to spend a short time together on Valentine's Day before I go and pick up my dinner to bring home. But yeah, Friday the 14th at 4 p.m. at the flagpole on 8th Street, just immediately adjacent to Owen Sound City Hall.
Okay, I'll be there. Yeah.
Perfect.
And
Thank you.
I will stress, sorry, Mayor Carlton, I will stress,
Yeah.
we will share details with council. We'll get the press release together and you will see all of that. It is a partnership event. So we're still working out who's doing which bits so that we don't duplicate efforts and cross wires. But we will make sure we share details with all members of council.
Thank you. Okay, and moving on then, next item is notice of motion or notice of discussion. Carly, sorry, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Through you, just I'm flagging the council remuneration policy, just as the definition of special events is not broad, and that policy speaks to council compensation having to be a motion of council. So I did just want to flag that to allow members of council who are going to attend to be compensated to do so if they wish. And in that case, a motion would be required.
Okay. Who all on council thinks that they will be able to be there and wishes to be remunerated for that? Councillor Coburn?
Thank you. No, I mean, I can be there. I'm not exactly sure that's what the clerk was asking for. I think she's asking for a motion for anyone who wishes to be compensated who can attend. My feelings are this is another ceremony that we ought to attend because we ought to attend, not because we are getting paid to do so. That's just my personal opinion on that matter.
So in actual fact, I hadn't thought about the remuneration part of it. I would state, though, that when any member of council attends an event such as this, we are there representing the township. We're not necessarily there in a personal position. So if a motion is needed to ensure that anyone who wishes to be remunerated needs to be put on the floor, then I would call for that. Councillor Scholdice.
Because I am one that is actually going to be there, I will say that yes, I am there representing the municipality, and I would like to be compensated for my time there for sure. So
Okay,
I would second the motion.
Okay, I can't make a motion. I need somebody else to make that motion. I'm chairing the committee.
I would happily make that motion.
Okay, can I have a seconder, please? Carly?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Through you, I did have some suggested wording here if that will help at all.
Okay.
that council endorse and authorize members to partake in the jointly hosted celebration of the Canadian flag on Friday, February 14th, 2025 at 4:00 p.m. for the purposes of the council remuneration policy.
Thank you. So that is moved by Councillor Schuldeis. Deputy Mayor, were you seconding that? Okay. If there is no further discussion, Councillor Coburn?
I'd like a recorded vote, please, on this one.
Okay. I will turn to the clerk.
Just one second to get set up here. Apologies. Thank you. Apologies for the delay. When I call your name, please indicate your vote for or against the motion. Councillor Isaac Schuldeis,
For.
Councillor Tobin Day,
Against.
Councillor Rick Winters,
Against.
Councillor Ryan Thompson,
Opposed.
Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn,
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Pringle,
For.
and Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
Unfortunately, that vote is lost 4-3.
Thank you. Councillor Day, I'm sorry. I noticed that your hand was up there.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to send my regrets. I can't make it on Friday, but we'll be spending part of the weekend at a Black History event in Dundalk. So there are many other things happening that are differently valuable this month as well.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, so we're back to notice of motion or notice of discussion. Does any member wish to provide one? Seeing none, we have no closed session. The confirming bylaw, the recommendation is that bylaw number 2025-012, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on February 12th, 2025, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And for adjournment, Committee of the Whole will meet as regularly scheduled on February 19th at 5 p.m. The recommendation now is that the meeting be adjourned at 6:32 p.m. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Day, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. And so far, no storm.